My son-in-law, Mark, hoisted the ceramic pot into the air, his face twisted into a mask of pure contempt. "I'm sick of looking at this dead thing," he shouted, his voice echoing in the small, quiet house I'd paid for. "It's useless, just like you." With a final grunt of effort, he marched to the front door, flung it open, and hurled my plant into the metal trash bin by the curb. The crash of shattering pottery was sharp and final. My sister Jessica stood by his side, a smug little smile playing on her lips. My mother just sighed and turned away, as if my humiliation was just an inconvenience she had to endure. I didn't say a word. I just stood there in the living room, feeling the cold, familiar sting of their disdain. They had no idea that withered, unassuming plant was worth more than the very house they were standing in, the house they all treated like their own personal hotel. You're probably wondering why a simple houseplant could be so valuable, and why on earth I would let him throw it away without so much as a protest. To understand that, you have to understand the 30 years I spent as the family's resident failure, their walking ATM, their scapegoat. My entire life was a series of sacrifices for their comfort, and my silence in that moment was not weakness. It was the calm before a storm that had been brewing for decades. It was the final piece of evidence I needed. An hour later, just as they were all sitting down for the dinner I had cooked, a long, gleaming black car, the kind you only see in movies, purred to a stop right in front of the house. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out, his expression calm and serious. He walked past the trash bin on the curb, giving it a brief, curious glance before ringing the doorbell. My heart didn't race. It beat with a slow, steady rhythm, like a drum counting down to the final act. Mark opened the door, his chest puffed out, ready to dismiss whoever it was. But his arrogance melted away when he saw the man, and more importantly, the car he came from. "Can I help you?" Mark asked, trying to sound important. He leaned against the doorframe, blocking the entrance as if he were guarding a fortress. The man in the suit, whose name I knew was Mr. Harrison, didn't even glance at him. His eyes scanned the room and settled on me. "I have an appointment with Mr. Evans," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "I'm here to finalize our transaction and collect the specimen." My sister Jessica let out a derisive snort from the couch. "There must be some mistake." "My brother doesn't have transactions. My husband Mark handles all the business in this family." She waved a dismissive hand in my direction. "He probably has the wrong address." This was their world. A world where I, Arthur Evans, was nothing more than a background character in the story of their own perceived success. A world where my name was synonymous with failure, a convenient resource to be tapped when they needed something, and an easy target for their frustrations when life didn't go their way. For years, I had accepted this role. I cooked, I cleaned, I paid the bills on this house, the house my parents had almost lost to foreclosure before I stepped in. I was the silent, steady foundation they built their comfortable lives on, and they never once thought to look down and see what was holding them up. They just stomped on it with their expensive shoes and demanded more. I took a calm step forward, moving past Mark's suddenly confused expression. "No mistake, Jessica," I said, my voice even. "Mr. Harrison is here for me. Please come in." I opened the door wider, and the distinguished man stepped inside, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the worn hardwood floor. His eyes held a spark of excitement, the look of a collector who is about to acquire his holy grail. He gave a polite, tight-lipped smile to the room before turning his full attention to me. "Arthur, it's a pleasure to finally meet in person. I trust the Pattaya Prime is ready for transport. I have a climate-controlled case in the car. The scientific name hung in the air, a foreign language to my family. They just stared, their minds unable to connect the fancy name to the piece of junk Mark had just thrown out. "About that," I said, maintaining perfect eye contact with Mr. Harrison. "There's been a slight change in its location." It's just outside. I raised my arm and pointed a single, steady finger toward the front window, directly at the dented metal trash bin at the end of the driveway. A flicker of disbelief, then sheer horror, washed over Mr. Harrison's face. "In the trash," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't wait for a reply. He moved with a speed that defied his elegant appearance, striding out the door and across the lawn. He didn't just open the trash bin, he handled it like it was a booby trap, lifting the lid with 2 careful fingers. The family, now utterly bewildered, drifted out onto the porch behind me, drawn by the bizarre spectacle. Jessica crossed her arms, annoyed at the interruption. Mark just looked confused, a smirk still lingering on his face as if this were all some elaborate joke at my expense. Mr. Harrison reached into the bin with the delicacy of a surgeon. He gently lifted the plant, its roots exposed and caked with coffee grounds. He cradled the main stalk in his palm, brushing dirt from a deep green leaf that had miraculously survived the impact. He examined the snapped stem where a smaller branch used to be, his jaw tightening with every passing second. "It's just a stupid plant," Mark finally blurted out, breaking the silence. "What's the big deal?" Mr. Harrison slowly turned, his eyes locking onto Mark with an icy fury. The polite businessman was gone, replaced by a predator. "A stupid plant," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This stupid plant, young man, is the Aglaonema pataya prime. It is one of only 3 known cultivated examples in the entire world. I flew here from New York this morning with a cashier's check in my briefcase, a check for $1.5 million. The number dropped into the silence like a boulder into a still pond. The smirk vanished from Mark's face, instantly replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed dread. Jessica's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and rapacious greed. My mother gasped, one hand clutching her chest. They stared at the dirt-covered plant in Mr. Harrison's hands as if they were seeing the face of God. To them, $1 million was a winning lottery ticket, a fantasy. To me, it was just the closing of a chapter. Their disbelief wasn't surprising. They had never seen value in anything I cared for. It started long before that plant came into my life. It began on my 10th birthday. I had asked for a new bicycle, the one thing I wanted in the whole world. Instead, I got a lecture about how money was tight and a set of encyclopedias to make me smarter. An hour later, a truck pulled up delivering a brand new pony for Jessica, whose birthday wasn't for another 6 months. My father patted her head and said, "Anything for my princess." That pony was just the beginning. From that day on, the roles were set in stone. Jessica was the princess, the golden child whose every whim was a command. I was the workhorse, the responsible one, the one whose needs were always secondary. When her grades were bad, it was because the teachers were unfair. When my grades were perfect, it was simply what was expected. When she crashed her first car, a brand new convertible they bought her for her 16th birthday, they mortgaged the house to buy her another one. When I needed money for a class trip, I was told to get a part-time job and learn the value of $1. The ultimate sacrifice came when I was 18. I had worked my entire life for one goal, to get into Cornell's botany program. It was my ticket out, my chance to build a life of my own. I not only got in, but I secured a near-full scholarship. I was ecstatic. But then came the family meeting. Jessica had just gotten engaged to Mark, and she wanted a fairy tale wedding, a 6-figure over-the-top spectacle to impress his wealthy parents. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table with solemn faces. "Arthur," my mother began, her voice quivering with practiced tears, "your sister's happiness is the most important thing. This is her one special day. Your school will still be there in a year or 2. They didn't ask me, they told me. They told me to defer my admission. They told me to give them the thousands of dollars I had painstakingly saved up from my job at the garden center. That money, my seed corn for the future, was spent on ice sculptures and a designer dress. I never went to Cornell. I stayed home, got a full-time job at a lumberyard, and took night classes at the community college. And I started paying the mortgage that they had taken out for Jessica's car. It was during that bleak, empty time that I met Mr. Tanaka. He was my elderly neighbor, a quiet, retired botanist who spent his days in his immaculate greenhouse. He saw me come home each day, covered in sawdust and exhaustion. He saw the small, hopeful tomato plants I tried to grow on my windowsill. He never said much, but he saw me. One afternoon, he called me over and pressed a tiny, fragile seedling into my hand. "This is for you, Arthur-san," he said. "It is a Pattaya prime, very rare. It requires great patience. Most people will see it as a simple weed, but you will know its true value." Mr. Tanaka passed away 3 years later, but I kept my promise. I nurtured that plant for over a decade. It grew slowly, quietly, in a corner of my room. It was my secret, my one connection to a man who had shown me more kindness than my own family ever had. It was the living symbol of my own quiet, overlooked growth. And now here it was, covered in garbage, the center of a storm I had been waiting for my entire life. The silence on the lawn was finally broken by Jessica. Her voice, usually dripping with sarcasm when she spoke to me, was now a thick, syrupy coo. "Oh, Artie," she said, using a childhood nickname I despised. "Oh my God, you poor thing. Why didn't you tell us it was so valuable? We had no idea." She spun around and slapped Mark's arm, hard. "Mark, you big idiot! Apologize to my brother right now. Tell him you're sorry." Mark, whose face was the color of chalk, just stammered. Yeah, Arthur man, I'm so sorry. I was just trying to clean up the porch. I thought it was... I'm sorry." His apology was as hollow as a drum. He wasn't sorry for insulting me or destroying my property. He was terrified of the money he had just thrown away. My mother rushed forward, trying to play the peacemaker she never was. "It was just a terrible misunderstanding, Arthur. A simple mistake. We can fix this." My father nodded eagerly, a greedy light in his eyes. "That's right, son. We're a family. Think of what we could do with that kind of money. We could finally fix the roof." They didn't miss a beat. Not you, but we. My $1 million plant had instantly become their winning lottery ticket, their solution to problems they had created. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, cutting through their pathetic chorus. "The immediate problem," he said, his voice sharp as glass, "is the integrity of the specimen." He held the plant up to the light, his expert eyes scanning every leaf, every inch of the root ball. "The primary rhizome seems to be undamaged, which is a miracle, but this breakage here," he pointed to the snapped stem, "and the shock from the impact and exposure, this significantly impacts its value for propagation. I cannot, in good faith, offer the agreed-upon price." He pulled out his phone. "I need to consult my client." The blood drained from their faces all over again. The hope that had just bloomed was withering before their eyes. They all turned to me, their expressions pleading. I ignored them completely and looked at Mr. Harrison. "I understand," I said calmly. "Please, take all the time you need." Mr. Harrison walked to the edge of the lawn, his back to us, and spoke in a low, rapid language I didn't recognize. The 5 or 10 minutes he was on the phone felt like an eternity. My family, unable to stay quiet, began buzzing like panicked flies. Jessica sidled up to me, placing a hand on my arm. It was the first time she had touched me voluntarily in years, and her hand felt like a spider on my skin. "Artie," she whispered, her voice conspiratorial, "don't worry. We'll make this right. Mark will pay you back for any damage, won't you, honey?" Mark, who was sweating through his polo shirt, nodded vigorously. "Yeah, whatever it costs, we're good for it. He wasn't good for it. They were drowning in credit card debt from a lifestyle they couldn't afford, a fact I knew because their overdue bills were still being sent to this address. My father chimed in, trying to sound like a wise patriarch. Now, son, let's be reasonable. Even if the offer is lower, it's still a fortune. A real nest egg for the family. For the family, not for me. They saw me as a bank, and a massive unexpected deposit had just been announced. They weren't seeing a brother or a son who had been wronged. They were seeing a walking, talking wallet, and they were terrified it was about to snap shut. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at them. I just kept my eyes fixed on Mr. Harrison's tailored suit, waiting. Finally, he ended the call and turned back towards us. His face was a mask of professional neutrality. He walked directly to me, completely ignoring the 3 other adults holding their breath beside me. "My client is disappointed in the state of the specimen," he stated flatly. "The damage reduces its viability for future cultivation, which was his primary interest. However, its rarity remains unchanged." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "He has authorized a final offer of $850,000. The offer is firm." A collective gasp went through my family. The number was smaller, but it was still an amount of money they couldn't truly comprehend. "Take it," Mark hissed. "Arthur, take the deal." Jessica's fingers dug into my arm. "Yes, Artie, please. Say yes." I let their panicked pleas hang in the air for a few seconds longer. I looked from my sister's desperate face to my father's greedy one. Then I turned back to Mr. Harrison. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I accept the offer." Relief washed over my family in a tidal wave. Jessica actually squealed with delight. Mr. Harrison simply nodded. "Excellent. I'll get the cashier's check and the transport case." As he walked towards his car, my sister threw her arms around my neck. "We're rich, Artie. We're rich." I gently but firmly pushed her away. "Not so fast," I said, my voice suddenly cold enough to freeze the summer air. "Before you start spending my money, there's the matter of this house we need to discuss. Specifically, the fact that you will need to be out of it by tomorrow." Jessica's celebratory cheer died in her throat. She stared at me, a confused laugh sputtering out. "What?" "Artie, what are you talking about? Don't be silly. This is our family home." My father stepped forward, his face turning a blotchy red. "You watch your tone, son," he boomed, trying to summon an authority he hadn't earned in 30 years. "This is my house. You don't get to make demands here." "That's where you're wrong," I said, my voice cutting through his bluster. "This hasn't been your house for a very long time." I'd been waiting for this moment. I'd rehearsed it in my mind 1,000 times, on long nights when their casual cruelty felt like a physical weight on my chest. "Do you remember, Dad, 12 years ago, when you took out that second mortgage to pay for Jessica's brand new BMW after she totaled the first one? And do you remember when the bank sent the first foreclosure notice 6 months later?" My parents' faces went pale. It was a chapter of their financial irresponsibility they had long since buried. "I remember," I continued, "because I was the one who went to the bank. I was the one who sat down with the loan officer and worked out a deal. I agreed to assume the entirety of the loan, both mortgages. In exchange, the deed was transferred into my name to secure my investment. I paid off the last of it 5 years ago. You haven't been living in the family home, you've been living in my house, rent-free, for 12 years. A stunned silence fell over them. Jessica looked at my parents, searching for a denial that never came. "All those years," I said, my voice low and steady. "While I was working 2 jobs, you were telling your friends I was directionless. While I was paying for the roof over your head, you were telling Mark I was a freeloader. You took my college fund for a wedding. You took my salary for your bills. You took my dignity for your entertainment. You treated me like dirt in the house that I owned." Just then, Mr. Harrison returned, holding a slim leather briefcase. He opened it and produced a thick envelope and a pen. "Mr. Evans, if you'll just sign the transfer of ownership." He handed me the documents. While my family watched in horrified paralysis, I signed my name, my hand perfectly steady. He then handed me the envelope. I didn't have to open it. I could feel the stiff rectangle of the cashier's check inside. $850,000. I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket and turned back to them. The money you thought was yours is now mine. The house you thought was yours is also mine. This is the end of the line. I want you all gone by noon tomorrow. If a single one of your belongings is still here, it will be thrown in the trash, just like my plant. For a moment, they just stared, their brains refusing to process the words. Then the dam of their entitlement broke, and a flood of rage and desperation poured out. "How could you?" my mother shrieked, her face crumbling into a mask of theatrical tears. "After everything I've done for you, I am your mother. I brought you into this world. You can't throw me out onto the street." She was trying to pull the old levers of guilt, the ones that had always worked before, but the mechanism was broken. I felt nothing. All I could think was, "You brought me into this world to be a servant for your princess." Jessica turned on Mark, her love and adoration instantly curdling into venom. "This is your fault," she screamed, shoving him hard in the chest. "You and your stupid temper. You threw away $1 million and now you're getting us thrown out of our home. You useless idiot." "Me?" Mark shoved her back, his face purple with rage. "You're the one who called him a failure 5 minutes before the magic car showed up. You've been bleeding him dry for years." As their sham of a perfect marriage imploded on my front lawn, my father just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. Mark, seeing no sympathy from his wife, finally turned his fury on the only target he had left, me. His eyes locked onto the envelope in my jacket. "You're not doing this," he snarled, taking a step toward me. "That money belongs to this family. You owe us." He lunged, his hands reaching for my jacket. He never made it. Mr. Harrison, moving with surprising speed, stepped between us. He didn't touch Mark. He simply put himself in the way, a calm, immovable object. "I would strongly advise against that," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. He gave a slight nod towards his car. The driver's door was now open, and the man standing beside it was built like a refrigerator. The message was clear. I was no longer unprotected. The fight went out of Mark instantly, replaced by the pathetic whimper of a bully who had finally met a real threat. The reality of their situation crashed down on all of them at once. They were losing everything. The house, the imaginary money, their personal ATM. They were left with nothing but the ugly truth of who they were. The shouting devolved into panicked, frantic whispers. "What do we do? Where will we go?" They started scrambling back into the house, not with dignity, but like looters in a riot, grabbing possessions, arguing over trivial things. I watched them for a moment, this chaotic explosion of the family I had given my life to. Then I turned my back on the noise, walked into the house, went to my room, and for the first time ever, I locked the door behind me. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the sweetest sound I had ever heard.